If you're like me, and you got no life and there's nowhere to go, then tune in to the Animation Truman Show. You'll be glad you did.
And here we are.
If you're like me,
Uh-oh.
and you got no life and
Well, we
there's
always
nowhere
like to hear the jingle twice if we can.
then tune in to the Animation Truman Show. You'll be glad you did.
Oh, and it keeps going and
If
keeps
you're like
going.
me,
Oh, there it goes
and you
again,
got
but we'll kill it this time. Okay, so, yeah. Here we are. I got to tell you, friends, I've been working hard. Hey, Arthritic One, you're new here. Welcome to the live stream. I haven't live streamed for a few days because I've been so busy getting the Salt and Light episode 6 completed. And so let's have a look, shall we? In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put the underscore in the background. So you guys tell me if the background music is too loud. That should be pleasant. Definitely this episode was very Mickey Mousey. Very Mickey Mousey. A lot of the music really commenting on the action. I certainly don't put myself in the class of Carl Stalling, or who did the Tom and Jerry's? I think it was Scott. What was Scott's last name? Who scored the Tom and Jerry cartoons? But yeah, you can see how frenetic this is. But it was fun. So yeah, I've been working on Salt and Light pretty much, not quite what you'd call full-time, but close to it. At least 6 hours a day. And just for the last couple days, I've really been trying to ramp it up. And as a result, we not only have episode 6 out only like 10 days after episode 5. So that's this right here. It's episode 6 that I released today. But also, believe it or not, episode 7 is ready for voices, music, and post-production. Pretty crazy, huh? So what we're going to talk about, though, tonight, I'm kind of thinking I want this to be a fairly chill session. What we're doing is we're actually going to work on episode 8, okay? So the last few sessions, these shots have been getting done. And it's feeling pretty good. So what I'm going to talk about is the Krita. This shot right here is being done largely with Krita transform masks. So I wanted to talk about some gotchas associated with animating with transform masks, because it's a super cool feature. You know, it's really useful, but it can tick you off if you're not careful, because you'll get crashes here and there if you do certain things. So we're going to look at this shot and kind of look at how I'm using the transform masks. So let me turn the music down a little bit, because it is actually distracting me a bit. Once it gets to the end of the episode, I'll probably just turn the music off. So there's about 4 more minutes of music. I am curious, you guys like having the music in the background? I know that came up a bit on Darren T's live stream. It probably depends on the music. I mean, this music is music that does tend to call attention to itself a bit. So there is that to consider. Anyway, Tahoma and I had a bit of a spat the last couple days. And by the way, Arthritic One, since you're here, I don't know if anybody else is here. What do you do animation-wise, and what software do you use? Curious what your tool of choice is. And I usually just ask people, like, why are you here? What are you here to learn, or what are you here to, you know, what's your reason for being here? Some people, I think, just want creative encouragement. Um, in some way I might be an example in a way, because, here's one guy creating a whole cartoon, so I am proving that it's possible, that's for sure. Right now, in fact, right now we're up to about 30 minutes. That's complete. Trying to nail it down. I'm not sure what that means. You're trying to figure out what your objectives are and that sort of thing. Okay, so around here, I'm a Tahoma Krita blender guy. Now, what I started to say was that I had a bit of a spat with Tahoma, and I'll show you what. Hey Maria, did you do? How far did you get with that whole microphone thing? Because I will say, if you do it and you wind up getting yourself a better rig, then I may ask you to do me a solid and redo some of those voiceovers, so that when it's released for distribution, I wouldn't mind swapping in better recordings, for the ones we have, just to get rid of that. You can hear it, I think, on the episode I released today. You can hear it a little more than before, maybe. I don't know. When you listen to stuff on headphones and you listen to the same thing 1,000 times in a row, you do get a little, bleary-eared, and you can't tell what's what anymore. But anyway, so hey Ross, Nagut 40, I saw you posted your thing on the traditional animation channel on Facebook. It's a great bit of animation, man. There's no doubt about it. Okay, I think that's the end of the music. So, and if it's not, we'll kill it anyway. Okay, so let me kind of show you what is going on here. On my other screen, what I need to do is jump back to not... Actually, yes, the episode just released. Actually, I'll just jump back over here. So the episode just released. Cardioid and what focus? You know what, Maria? I will make myself a note. I'll make myself a note to, right now, on my little task list, to send Maria my mic and interface recommendation. Because if you want to duplicate my setup, you need the shotgun mic, you need the adapter that gets you from microphone into your Android or computer. And by the way, I'm using that adapter right now. Actually, this shotgun mic is connected to it's really cool because there's no drivers or installation. It's not persnickety, and what I found is I can just plug and unplug it and go use it on my Android device and plug it back in the computer. It just works. So it's kind of a rare and pleasant surprise in that regard. But I'll send you. I just made myself a to-do to send you what I'm using, and as I said the other day, I think for a person to duplicate my situation is going to cost around $50. So there it is, my friends. Yeah, I'll send you the microphone, the adapter, and of course you will also need the USB to mini USB of the right type depending on your phone. If you're a newer phone might be USB-C as opposed to just a standard mini USB, so it depends. But anyway, back to the show here. This sequence right here, Tianara is talking to Golek. Okay, so this is shot number 488. Okay, so let me find it here. No, it happens to be right there. Okay, so people ask all the time here, what do you prefer in terms of software? Okay, and I always tell people, if you're really going to do the deep dive and you're looking for job opportunities, then you're probably going to want to learn Blender, I would think. But, I'm a Blender guy, but it's really the third tool in the toolkit. So basically, it's always this tug of war between Tahoma 2D and Krita. Okay, well, I want to put it this way, and we'll get to transform masks here shortly, but here's the thing. What you'll find with Krita, because it's very mature as a paint program, it's less mature as an animation program. Let's put it that way. Tahoma, or OpenToons, is pretty mature as an animation program, but is actually somewhat more primitive as a paint program. Okay. So I won't get into the differences are many, okay? But what I learned with this shot is that when Krita hoses you, it's usually in the micro space. In other words, you didn't take a couple necessary precautions before you did certain things that cause it to crash. And then, you have to reload the project and you keep moving forward, that kind of thing. So it's little things that can cause crashes, but basically if you were really careful, most of the time it's your fault. Okay, most of the time it's my fault. When I have a problem with Krita, it's usually my fault because I didn't, I got moving too fast, and I won't get into what those things are because there's quite a few of them. And certainly a lot of the new features surrounding, say, the transform masks are on the buggy side. But as I will demonstrate shortly, it's one of those things where you go, well, is it a feature or is it a bug? Because if you know how to get around the problems, it turns out that it's actually fairly stable. Tahoma is different. Tahoma screws you very occasionally, but when it screws you big. And I understood when I ran into this situation why Alan Dan has abandoned OpenToons completely. I totally understand his point of view where he's going, it's just not a professional program. And of course, nobody would ever accuse Krita of being a professional animation program. But you can get the job done, clearly. But Tahoma, with the DNA of Toons, which is a program that's been around for like a quarter century, some of the things that are winky about it are pretty vexing. So what happened here was, if you think about it, OpenToons' most basic DNA would be, here's a program that allows you to do sequences of images. So like you could use any paint program to create the images. It doesn't really matter because in the old days what people were doing was they were scanning line art in, and then one of Toons' claims to fame was being a good cleanup program. And you could use it for essentially digital ink and paint. Well, the problem is that like this right here, look, see that white line right there? Okay, here's a program that's been around for a quarter century that still doesn't know how to deal properly with alpha channel edges, okay? And I'm not like making this up. It's a known problem, and it's a frequent problem, and there's little fixes. You can add any aliasing, you can do an extra pre-multiply step. And I want to say this, when you're comparing Tahoma to Krita, there's nothing you can do in either program for the most part that you can't do in the other. That is true. Amar's correct. For painting, no question. No question, Krita is dominant. What gets under my skin sometimes with Tahoma is little things like this because, well, how do you fix this? Well, you can fix it. Actually, you could fix it with a curves operation on the alpha channel, for example. There are ways to fix it, okay? But it is a little ridiculous that it gets confused. So what happened was on episode 6, I had, let me look through here and see if these are all like this. See, I think there are actually images that were fine a couple days ago, and after doing some modifications of them in Krita, they are actually messed up again. I'm not sure. It's become a bit of a cluttered mess, but the bottom line is you've got this artifacting. And this is just a normal ping. I mean, it's just a ping sequence. So that's one of the little niggly issues. I think the thing that sort of got Alan Dan to abandon tunes had to do with the smart raster levels and the artifacting that occurs with the way it judges, like when you paint something and then you paint over it and it doesn't actually cover it up. Well, I'm not going to recap it here because most of you guys are probably familiar with the issue, but it's a big issue. I mean, if you're really trying to get a lot of work done, it's like if you go through and you do the shot the first time and everything's clean, you do your fill operations, you don't make any mistakes, you don't have to make corrections, then it's fine. But the minute you have to go in and start fixing something, which like happens all the time, then you begin to hit those edge cases where it starts to fall apart. The greater problem we ran into on this shot is that there's basically images missing. So you've got this image sequence, and I can guarantee you I did not go in and delete images. You know what I mean? So Tahoma got confused, and so when I reopened these to make some fixes, I discovered that there were images missing. I'm like, well, okay, what do you do with that? And there are actually, if you go into episode 7, it turns out that there are 9 shots in the show that all need some punching up where effectively the Tahoma projects are broken. That's a big deal. I mean, that is a big freaking thing to have to chase down and figure out what went wrong, And I could speculate what went wrong. But by this time in history, it seems to me that the program should have a little more intelligent way to at least compensate for these kinds of problems. In the case of Vegas, for example, if for example, like you have what we have here where there's a missing image, then, and by the way, Reaper does the same thing, is it gives you the ability to immediately search for it or browse for the missing file and this sort of thing. So anyway, Tahoma and I had a little bit of a spat. So I'm like, what do I do? Well, my solution to the problem was this, and this will get me back to Krita. The thing I find in Krita is that even though it's buggy and even though it crashes, I can always solve the problem. There's always a way fairly quickly to use the tools at hand to fix what's wrong. Sometimes it involves creating an extra utility layer or something. Well, you can do that in Tahoma too, but it's not as easy to just immediately like apply a fix over an animated sequence and then bake it into the actual images. Right? So with Krita, it's like you got something that's wrong, so then you put in the fix and then you bake it down and then you move on to the next thing. And you can just fix things and sort of build up the solution and the quality of the shot, right, over time. With Tahoma, you can do the same thing, but you're gonna tend to have an X sheet that's really growing. Like really, unless you're gonna render the whole thing, bring it into a whole nother level and do it that way. I mean, as I say, you can do it, but it's a bit of a pain. I've just been finding lately to get both the image quality and to just get stuff done. I see, as much as I've complained over the years about Krita, because it is buggy. But anyway, back to oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been live streaming 45 minutes. Let me look at Amar's comments, because Amar usually has some pretty vociferous comments about CSP in particular. And I saw CSP gives you the stability and painting ability of Krita, but with all the animation capability one needs to do frame by frame animation. Yeah, but CSP also has pretty good translation tools, doesn't it? I mean, you can do keyframe animation on layers or groups, I assume, just like you can with the transform mask and Krita. Is that not true? Or does Clip Studio Paint still not have, keyframeable translations and whatnot? If you were to choose out three, Blender would be the best choice because, yeah, I mean, Blender's, yes, you can. Okay, that's what I figured. So Blender, I mean, yeah, for sure. If you're starting from scratch and you want to know for sure that you're going to be able to capture whatever your vision is as an animator, and also have a performant way to do sort of the cheeseball stuff that pays the bills, like maybe explainer videos, and also have the ability to do world-class special effects and all that kind of stuff. I mean, for sure, Blender is the most well-rounded tool in the toolkit. But as I said, with Krita, just because of the layer-based approach, I just find that I can solve problems quickly. It's like I know the lexicon of the program, so when I see something, I usually know what to do, right, to deal with it. That's pretty true with Tahoma as well. It's just more of a pain in the butt. It's not as true with Blender anymore. Ever since, well, certainly 2.8 and forward, I don't consider myself a guru. There was a time when I was one of the world's gurus on Blender, actually, but that's been 20 years ago. Okay, so transform masks. What we have here is, and I'm saving frequently because I fully expect Krita to crash at some point during this little odyssey. So I did this sketch with conventional frame by frame animation because I just wanted to feel the action. I thought it was kind of funny if he's like, Tianara. Okay, so there's a whole backstory behind why that's kind of funny, but it's neither here nor there. The point is, that felt pretty good. Well, in terms of blocking in the pencil test, I didn't really want to do it as, frame by frame animation. If I can take the shape of his body, or at least part of it, like the parts that are rigid, that aren't necessarily going to change shape too much, right? Because it's just a 3/4 view shot. So I basically used the free transform tool to just move the frames around and block in the animation frame by frame. That was my starting point. But then I thought, well, okay, let's see if we can use transform masks in a way that doesn't like blow up all the time. To be able to build up the ink and paint without doing 20 or 30 frames of ink and paint. Well, you can. So the first thing I would say is this. I think I mentioned this in the live stream the other day. I first of all, I took the sketch and I moved the sketch outside of the group. So this character is Vespar, and I didn't want the sketch to be in the group, because if I apply the transform mask to the group, then it's going to move the sketch too, whereas the sketch, being a sequence of drawings, already has the movement baked into it. So it's important to have the sketch in another layer. I tend to put the sketch or the pencil test on top, so that whatever I'm doing in the ink and paint stage, I can always see the drawing. It doesn't like disappear under. Yeah, I've heard that about Flip a Clip and Rough Animator, actually. Yeah, Amar's saying the brush engine. I will say that for me, the problem in Tahoma or OpenTunes isn't the brush engine. I mean, there's things you could complain about. If you really need animated brushes, then go use Blender or, and I say, not just with the grease pencil, but with some of the most recent advancements. But also for years we've been able to have fully animated brushes in Blender in the UV editor. You just have to do some sort of non-intuitive things in order to make it work. But anyway, so what I did was I did the ink. Okay, step one. If you're going to use a transform mask, make sure you're working in a scene that's large enough that your character moving around in the scene isn't going to get cut off. Okay, so like if you see here in the sketch, I've got this drawing of Vespar. Well, I want to reuse the drawing, right? Okay, so I move the drawing over to here. Well, when I move it over here, of course, everything from his shoulder to the right is cut off, and I have to redraw it. Now, that's not a big deal. You just redraw it. But the point is, if you don't plan carefully, then you could, do a bunch of ink and paint and then realize once you move things around that half your character still has to be added on a different layer or something like that. The simple solution is to use a big enough canvas, preferably so that your entire character from beginning to end is fully within the canvas. If you do that, that's going to be a really good starting point for you, because then when you render it and bring it into the show, like this is the frame I'm drawing, but I'll just zoom in here. When it's in the show, it's cropped to, oops, sorry guys. It's cropped to something like that. So about a third of the frame is cropped out. So this is actually a full HD frame, but the show is broadcast HD. So you lose about a third of the frame. And that's by design. That's not a bad thing. And so step one, if you're going to use transform masks, is to make sure your canvas is big enough. That's just good policy. Now here's the next thing. Really important. I guess again, I did explain this the other day, so I'm probably being redundant for some of you, so I'll make it quick. The transform mask does seem under the hood to derive a mask. In other words, it makes a judgment about the pixel content of your drawing. Okay, and the problem with that is that it seems to make that decision when you add the transform mask to your layer or your group, whatever, and there's no real going back. So in practice, what that means is make sure that whatever you're going to add the transform mask to fully encompasses, at the very least, all the area within the canvas that's ever going to have anything moving around inside of it. For me, that means just add a layer and paint it a solid color. Just do that. By adding a layer that was painted blue, in this case I just did a fill operation, that meant that when I added the transform mask, any character drawings that are moving around in different ways within that blue zone are going to be affected properly by the transform mask, and you're not going to get these weird creative bugs happening where stuff just disappears. Which, when it happens, it actually kind of makes sense, because I think what's really going on is stuff sliding under and outside of the mask. That's really what's happening. It's the same problem you have in Tahoma with the plastic tool. If you derive a mesh on a drawing in order to use the plastic tool, and let's say the character has his arms out like this, well, if you add another drawing within the same plastic tool where the drawing itself changes, but now the arms are up like this, well, when the arms go up like this, the arms will get chopped off because the mesh effectively crops to the drawing that it discovers when it creates the mesh, right? And you can do the same thing in Tahoma. If you're going to use a plastic tool, it's, we're going down a side road here because there's a lot of gotchas associated with doing it this way, but you can use the plastic tool in Tahoma where you derive the mesh from the same thing I have here, just a solid rectangle. And that way your characters can move around within that rectangle, and you can use the bones and the deformation and all that. no problem. But it's really hard to control. So for those who want to know what you can do with Clip Studio Paint, just watch Amar's comments, because he's usually singing the praises of Clip Studio Paint. Okay, so what we see here, number one, have a big enough canvas. Number two, create a solid filled area of the entire canvas before you add the transform mask, so that the transform mask knows that what it's going to operate on, no matter what, is the entire canvas, not a piece of it. That right there will save you. I don't know about crashes, but the things about the transform tool that drive you crazy because you don't understand why it doesn't work the way you thought it should, that's the reason. So what you do is you add a solid filled layer, then add the transform mask, then turn the solid filled layer off. What does that do for me? Well, what that does is I was then able to draw the first drawing of Vespar. And actually, let's turn the transform mask off because I want to show this. Now you can see right there, you can see some artifacting. Like, why is all that blue there? The blue layer is turned off. Well, I turned it on, and there's a Krita-ism for you, if you will. You see all this pixel artifacting because the buffers are corrupted or something. Well, I turn the blue layer back on and back off, and then the problem goes away. That's totally typical for Krita. So those are the kind of bugginesses that they don't break the bank. They don't completely wreck your ability to get any work done, but they can be a little annoying or confusing. Okay, so here's what I did. What I actually did was, because I didn't want Vespar to be cut off, I moved out into the frame. And this isn't a perfect. Okay, let me put it this way. I went to this frame and did the ink. Okay, stick a pin in that. Now, since I did that, I've made some changes in the animation so that the ink doesn't line up with the pencil test anymore. That's okay, and that's intentional. But the idea was to draw him out here and then use the transform mask to translate him back off the screen. So once I did this, I added the transform mask, and then this is another thing I found with the transform masks is add a single keyframe. Go to the first frame you want to operate on, and of course you can work your way backwards, but just go and add one keyframe. So I hit the plus sign, add one keyframe. From then on, I'm not adding keyframes in the curves editor, not at all. I'm just going back to the timeline, and anywhere I want to change something in the animation, I just hit the A key to use the free transform tool, move the stuff around, and that creates another keyframe. Now, if you really have to get rid of a keyframe, which definitely can happen, be aware Krita is keeping track of all of these channels: shear, scale, rotation, and position. Maybe you only wanted to rotate it. Maybe you only wanted to scale it. Tough luck. When you add an animation keyframe in Krita, it's going to add animation keys for all of those parameters. So this is something I discovered just the other day. I used to be frustrated because I would go in here and I don't even think you can hit control. Like if I go like this, maybe it's shift. Okay, if you hit shift, you can grab each of the nodes. The catch is that these parameters have animation keys, but they have no values. They're all set at the default because I haven't done anything with those parameters, like the shear, for example. Okay, so what that means is I've got a bunch of keyframes here that are all actually overlapping each other in the screen. I can't see them. I can't click them and, you know, intelligently grab a parameter. Now you sort of can, because you can turn these channels off. But now you're into, 8 million clicks just to solve a simple problem. The simple fix is this. And by the way, this is important. It doesn't do you any good to try to delete this keyframe. I can take this keyframe and I can click and drag and move it in the timeline, and I can even duplicate it, but I can't delete it. Okay, sounds kind of weird. The way you delete the animation keyframe is grab the key and double click, and then what it does is it does the same thing that the timeline does. So I can kind of understand why they did it this way, because if you double click in the timeline, it selects the whole column, which means all of the layers on that frame get selected. So that's definitely useful at times. So if you need to get rid of an animation keyframe, just go to the frame and double click so it selects everything in that column, and then hit the little minus button. I don't really get into all this other stuff. Like I haven't done easing, like, you know, with the different, you know, Bezier curves, because frankly to me it's easier to just add another keyframe and roll my own easing anyway. So that's my opinion. Other people may differ. So that pretty much is it. Have the initial layer of solid colors so that the transform mask is selecting everything. Number one. Number two, have a big enough canvas. Number three, just create one animation keyframe and then move things around and just build out the animation. Excuse me. In fact, in this case, what I did was I drew Vespar out here, and then I immediately set a keyframe on frame 1 to move him back over to here. Okay, well then I actually moved that key to here because I want him to just stay in that position until he gets to here. And then what I did was I actually just created like, well, I think I created this, and then probably this, his finishing position. And then went back and just did the tweens by hand, you know, saying, you know, when he goes from here to here, I actually want him to scoop a little bit. When he goes from here to here, I actually want him to recoil a little bit. Things like that. So right. Well, I would expect, Amar, that you can. Every program's got its quirks. I fret, not to be snarky or anything, but I'll bet you if I spent 2 weeks in Clip Studio Paint, I'd probably find out that there's some quirks. But I've spent enough time with Clip Studio Paint so far to know that it's not my cup of tea. But that's nothing against the program. It's basically the interface. It probably turns out the interface is totally customizable, and you can like kind of do what I did in Blender 2.81, which is just sort of trim everything unnecessary out of the interface so that you have a clean space to work in. Clip Studio is a really crowded program, but that might just be the default, and you know, maybe I just haven't spent the time. Other people here have said it's extremely stable though, so there's that. And so is Blender as far as that goes. Okay. So the interesting thing about this is the following. By adding the transform mask to a group, it's going to affect all the layers in the group. Okay? So once I set the transform mask, I can turn this off. I don't need that. And then what I was able to do is just add color and shadows. And what you don't want to do, like okay, so let's say you got these animation keys, which we do, and you say, well, I want to just like paint into those frames, let's say. There are reasons why you might want to, okay? Well, you got to be careful. It's the same thing you run into with the plastic tool in Tahoma, where you can't paint directly into the frames once the plastic tool is applied. It actually makes sense. Why? Well, because if I wanted to paint a mustache on Vespar right now, remember, Vespar is not there. In terms of the pixels, he's not there. Okay? In fact, he's not here either. He's actually here. This is where he is. So you have to kind of think sideways, because in this case, Once I got the raw movement in there, I said, okay, I want to have a reaction with the cloth, okay? Well, what I did was I said, well, once he bounces into this position, he goes broink like that. Okay, so that's on frame 8, 9, 10, 11. 9, 10, 11. So then what I did was, and this is really an important thing, I can't, I'm asking for trouble if I paint into that frame while the transform mask is active. I'm not even going to say you can't do it. I'm going to say it's dangerous behavior because you're not painting where you think you are. Okay? So the thing I've done with this shot that's proven to be really, really smart, apparently, is every time I know what I want to do next in terms of paint or animation or deformation, immediately turn off the transform mask. Okay? I know where I want the dynamics on the cloth to happen. And so, which is frames 10, 11, 12. So then even though he's not moving right now, I just went like that. I just added that to the frame or to the animation, knowing full well that when I turn the transform mask back on, I'm going to get this dynamic reaction after he stops moving. Like that. Bloop. Bloop. So there's a little bit of this back and forth. The other thing I did, what I have found is, number one, transform masks don't work. They don't play nicely with liquefy. Okay? Let me qualify that. Animated transform masks don't play well with liquefy. If I had a character, let's say I have a flat sequence of drawings of Peter Griffin, and he's got a bunch of eye blinks going on, and he's got a bunch of mouth shapes going on. He's sitting there in a typical Family Guy shot. He's blabbing away. The problem is I have an image sequence that's fully baked, shadows, color, ink and paint. It's all one flat sequence. And the problem is, when they drew the darn thing, they drew Peter wrong. Let's just say. Okay? In that scenario, you can add a transform mask to the entire image sequence and use liquefy on it to do the same thing you would do with shape keys in Blender. You morph the drawing in order to fix Peter. And then what happens is that deformation gets applied to all of those frames. If you didn't do it that way, you would have to reproduce the same exact deformation maybe 25 times, and there's no way. It's not going to happen. So your animation is going to chatter, probably a lot, right? So that's where you can use liquefy with a transform mask to do a deformation that covers an entire sequence of frames. You cannot add animation keys to the transform, but you can use liquefy. Okay? I've used that more than once. There was actually a series of shots here in Salt and Light with Mel that I had to fix up that way, and it worked. So you can do that. Once you get into adding animation keys to a transform mask in order to move stuff around the screen, you must only use the standard transform tool, the free transform. None of these other ones work with animated transform keys. So that's important to remember. If you try it, you're going to blow up the program and your pixels are going to disappear. And by the way, I've seen it happen where it's a situation that can't be effectively recovered from. I'll just leave it at that. It's not something you want to try. Okay. However, this is the important thing. This is what's really significant. I have found that if you have a transform mask applied to a character, so the transform mask, right now, look, Vespar's not going anywhere. Okay, there is this distortion here. But I did that by adding keyframes. I actually used liquefy on the group, which allowed me to stretch his body a little bit at the end of the animation. Okay, so that's just using liquefy. So that's great. What I've found in the past is if you're using a transform mask and you apply liquefy to the character, even if you're not trying to use it on the transform mask, if you start fiddling around with liquefy over here, things start going crazy. Well, I think I found the secret. The secret is the blue frame. If you have a filled frame so that you know that everywhere that there's pixel data and everywhere that there's blue there is pixel data, as opposed to Krita thinking, you know, this is the pixel data around my character. Everything inside has data and everything outside is just alpha. It's empty. If you have the blue frame in there, even if it's turned off, as long as the transform mask knew at some point that all of these pixels mattered, then you can go ahead and use liquefy on the entire group. And in this case, that's what I did. I distorted, well, here's what I did. I went to, let's go to frame 24, and what I'm doing is I'm using liquefy on the group. So I'll hit the A key. Okay. Okay, so there I just distorted Vespar, and Krita added animation keys to all of these layers, and it would continue to do so no matter how many layers I have in the group. Okay. The key to doing that, though, so keeping all your, you want to keep all your layers synchronized, you know, ink, paint, shadows. The key to it is before you start messing around with deformations, make sure every important layer has at least one animation keyframe in it. Krita needs to be told that this is supposed to be an animated layer. As long as you put in one keyframe, then when you distort it downstream, it'll automatically add the necessary keyframes. Okay? Now here's the killer. I've seen this happen many times where if you did this sort of distortion, but then you turn the transform mask back on, your character just disappears. All the pixels just disappear. And I'm really sure from the tests that I've done, this is the reason why. By having that blue layer in there so that it doesn't lose track of the enclosing space is the key to using the transform mask effectively. Now I can turn it back off, turn the transform mask back on, and all the animation I'm doing with the transform mask propagates quite nicely to the character. No problem. Okay, that's a big deal. I mean, for a month, I'm like, geez, you know, I kept bumping into the, you know, the edge cases, of which there were a lot, that kept the transform mask from being as effective as it should be. So those are pretty much the keys. Now in this case, and by the way, as I demonstrated earlier, if I go click, 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 and then for me, Control-Shift-X, I can just get rid of that keyframe. So, and interestingly, even though the transform mask is still turned on, Krita didn't puke on that. So I can't speak with authority because I'm not a coder of Krita, but I'm pretty darn sure you're going to find this is a really, really big deal. As long as you do that first, you can start to use the transform mask in the way that you would like. Now, here's another thing I want you guys to know. What if you have a situation, let's go like this. I'm going to show you a very, very common scenario that could come up. Okay, so we've got our character in a group, and just to keep things as stable as possible, I'm going to turn the transform mask off, okay? So now we've done that, and then we say, well, wait a minute. Now we've got a framing problem, let's say, and we need to scale our entire character down a little bit, but we need everything to be scaled down a little bit, okay? The way you do it is just as intuitive as you would think. What you would probably want to do, you could add a second transform mask to this group, but I don't recommend it. So what I would do is I would grab the entire group and hit Control-G to literally put the group inside of a group. And then I would add the transform mask to this group. Now I'm gonna really try to make this complicated and start breaking things. Okay. So the first thing I'm gonna do on this transform mask is add an animation key. Boom. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is pull out here. Okay. So it's interesting to me, as you can see, because I didn't have the blue layer turned on, you can see that Krita, as far as Krita is concerned, this is the pixel data. Now that's a little dangerous. Why? Well, because what if he moves around within the frame outside of this cropping zone? Are things going to start breaking? Well, I'm not sure. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and modify the entire frame. So now this is animated. Okay, that worked. The problem is we want all of Vespar's animation to also happen within that zone, you know, that's being scaled. Let's just see what happens. Okay. So now we're getting all of the animation and the second level of transform. I can say, I can't say that I know for sure, but I can say with pretty good confidence that this would have crashed at least twice in the last 20 minutes if it wasn't for this layer. I'm really, really sure having that in there is important, like super important. However, now the question becomes, well, can I keep monkeying with this with all the transform masks turned on? Well, yeah, you can. Let's, I guess I'll save my work because I haven't done anything that's actually destroying the scene that I'm working on. So I'll go ahead and, even though the other transform mask is turned on, I'll go ahead and do something really radical like shear it. Okay. So almost amazingly, Krita's actually doing a good job of keeping track of everything, you know. Now the problem you're going to have is you're going to start running into performance issues. Anything that's a quote unquote mask that's applied to a whole sequence of frames typically is pretty performance. You know, you're going to incur a penalty. But so it's got to regenerate the cache. This is actually not too bad though. I mean, that's surprisingly good, frankly, performance. But what I'm coming around to is if you're going to bake it down, and you probably will want to, if you're sure you've got what you wanted, then you probably do want to bake it down. My procedure for baking it down is, number one, never would I merge this group and just have it all bake it down. Why? Well, because basically every time I've done that, Krita hangs. Why? Because if there are two transform masks within a group, and so it's got to do a full calculation and then a calculation on the calculation. In my experience, Krita blows up every time. Well, it doesn't blow up, it hangs. In other words, it basically takes forever and you can go have lunch and come back half an hour later and it still isn't done calculating it, which is clearly a bug in the program, because if the program is able to play it back in real time, then obviously the result of all those calculations is already stored in memory. So why should it take any time at all for it to bake it down, right? Yet it does. So my recommendation is always going to be to merge the inner group first, and that'll probably happen fairly quickly, and then take that and merge the outer group. Work from the inner to the outer. Okay. Something else I was going to say about that. Kind of interesting. I haven't used shearing a lot, but shearing is, you can get some pretty plasticky effects with shearing, actually. Anyway, let me think about what I was going to say on the... Oh, before you bake it down, just make a duplicate. So what I typically do, actually, is if I know that this is what I want it to be, I'm going to actually turn the transform masks off, close the group, and then make a duplicate of it like that. And then I'm going to do all of my baking down. I'm going to start turning things back on one at a time, like turn this on and merge the group. Let's see how long that takes. You can see it working. Okay, so it took about, what, 10 seconds? And then turn the second one on and merge this group. And now it's basically not having to think too multi-dimensionally, and, you know, it can handle it. So we'll see if this one takes a little longer, but it certainly does. Okay, so there you go. So if I isolate this layer, you can see now I've got a simple image sequence. Everything's baked in, and performance is going to be fine, yada, yada, yada. And I still have this group I can come back to if I made a mistake and there's something that's got to be fixed. So we'll get rid of that. And we'll also get rid of this transform mask here. We don't need it. And I'm going to take Vespar now and his whole group and move him outside of this group and then delete this group. So now I'm back to where I started. Okay, another thing that I did, it's a good example actually of those quick and dirty fixes that you can do in Credo when things go a little sideways. When I added this little shake, this little bit of dynamics, okay, it doesn't make sense here, but if we put the transform mask on, then it makes sense because he goes, Tianara. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing down here where we're going to add liquefy to this little bit so that this flap falls. I mean, frankly, you could certainly make the case that I probably should do it here as well, but I don't think that's that important on a show like Salt and Light, but having a little bit of gravity acting on this would probably be pretty useful. So we'll keep that in mind. But here's the thing. I want to show you guys this very specific fix that has saved my bacon 15 times in the last month, at least. Here's the deal. We'll turn the transform mask back on. Okay, so I used liquefy, but I didn't want to have to do a bunch of patching, so I just used liquefy on the whole picture of Vespar. But the problem was there was some distortion artifacts where his shoulder basically got affected by the liquefy operation. The fix is so simple. It's quick, it's easy, it works. The fix was, okay, so figure you can't see it right now, but the problem is his shoulder's a little distorted, okay? I mean, frankly, let's just do it here. Let's just show the same thing. I'll do it here, and I'm sure the same problem is going to happen. So we leave our transform mask off. I'm just going to put in the animation keyframes, and it doesn't matter where I put them because I can always move them in order to get the timing right. Okay, so if we look at the transform mask, what I'm about to do really needs to happen. Let's just look at this. Zoom, boom. Yeah, so probably about frame 20. What is that? 27? Yeah. Probably around frame 27. So let's turn the transform mask back off. So we know we're going to have this distortion around frame 27. Now there's one issue. We really need to know what the angle of that fix is going to be. So this is where a utility layer makes all the sense in the world. Okay? If you're going, what are you talking about, Dave? I'll show you. Okay. So this is, I totally recommend doing this like liberally. All right. So here's on another layer. What I'm saying is I want to have a little bit of gravity. I don't want it to necessarily fall completely flat, but basically this is what we want. Okay. That's what we're after in terms of the cloth, the dynamics. Okay. So great. Now I can turn the transform mask back off and then take this utility layer and just hit the transform tool. And if I line up this edge here with that, like there, I'm sorry, like that, I don't need the transform mask to be turned on in order to know that this flap has to come out to here. And that's what's going to look more or less, you know, vertical to the ground when once it's transformed. Okay? Kind of makes sense. In fact, if I were to take this layer and drag it into the group, save your work. Every time I do something in Krita lately, I save. Although I have autosave turned on, and Krita's autosave is like 100 times better than Tahoma's. When Tahoma autosaves, you know, go have another sandwich because it takes forever to save. Whereas Krita, it's like, boom, done. Very much in the background. Okay, so I would say I'm actually going to amend this a bit. I guess I'll just liquefy it. I'm going to pull that out more like that, I think. Yeah, that gets us where we want to be. Okay, cool. All right, so now this is what I was talking about. And again, this layer can be up here. Okay, so there's plenty of ways to do this, okay? If you're going to use liquefy for what I'm about to do, this is a pretty bad idea, okay? Because the distance that this has to move is sufficiently great that there's no way you're going to do it convincingly without causing all kinds of distortions to everything else. So real quick, I'll just demonstrate what the heck I'm talking about. So right now, if I use liquefy, I would really need to have a pretty small affected area. Like that. So that you can then basically go like this. And then what it's doing is it's doing a distortion of the ink and the paint and the shadows. Everything all in one. Now, as you can see, there's no way you're going to make that distortion convincingly. Now, there is a case to be made for what I just did as a tween. Okay, that's actually not a bad looking tween to have it sort of wrinkle like that. Okay, so now how do we get back to what we're actually trying to accomplish? Well, just go over here and make a copy of this here. Okay, so it goes from that to that. And now what we're going to do, we'll just turn this guide back on. The way I would do this, actually, think of it this way. What is it in the drawing that for our purposes could be considered rigid? Okay? And for me, that would be the edge, the part that's got some thickness to it, the light gray. Okay? So the problem we have is that you cannot work with all the layers together as a group as far as a cut and paste operation unless they're baked together. Okay? So we're going to have to do this a little bit the clunky way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab okay, and by the way, I'm going to turn this opacity of this way down. I just want it to be hot enough so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the A key and then I'm going to anchor it in this corner. Why? So I can now go like this. All right. And now, okay, interesting. That's actually a little bit of a clunker too, is that, and I'd have to think about, okay, once I applied the transform, the selection area itself got transformed. Well, I really didn't want that. I really wanted the same transformation and the same selection on all of these layers. Okay, so, well, you know, it turns out in this case we can't quite have that. So it is what it is. So I'm going to basically just redo the selection. And, I mean, clearly, in this case, it'd probably be faster to just redraw it, okay? So I understand that. We're just looking at things you can do with the the transform tools. Okay, so that got us where we wanted to be. All right. Control-Shift-A. I can turn this off. And now this is key. We can liquefy in reverse with a lot less distortion. I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay. So here, first of all, I'm just going to hit the G key for the freehand. Freehand path tool. And then I'm just going to fill that in, right? Because that's what we were after. And why didn't it transform? I'm a little confused here, friends. Oh, there it is. Okay, I see. So this column can be deleted, and this can be moved close. Actually, let's not do that. Let me undo that. I'm going to go ahead and add a tween. Okay, so, and it's probably going to cause the dynamics to happen too slowly, but that's not bad. Okay, the whole wrinkle thing isn't really working that well, so it's there. If we want to use it, we'll just delete it if we don't. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two keys and make a copy of them in the middle so that I can then do the opposite of, the opposite of what I did before, which is to use liquefy, and I can use a little bigger brush now, because all I'm trying to do is get back away from this final position. And I'm not, I keep hitting the wrong keys, I'm not going to I'm having a brain fart here on my, oh, it's shift left mouse drag, sorry, trying to resize my, the dadgum. Okay, and by the way, right now I need to have the whole group selected so that it makes the distortion on all the layers. Okay, that's all I needed. Okay, let's see what we have. See, that's not too bad, actually. It's a little slow, probably. I mean, we're probably going to wind up having to take one of the keys out, but let's just see. So I'm going to save my work and turn the transform mask back on and see if it feels pretty good. Yeah, it's all happening too late, obviously. But, so let's just look at this again. Boom, bop, bop. Yeah, I think we need to actually butt that right up to it. Okay, so, you know, pretty, you know, maybe there's easier ways to do it. You know, somebody out there is going to say, well, why don't you use Blender and use soft body dynamics, right? But something like that does add a lot of production value pretty cheaply. And if I wasn't explaining this to somebody, I would say the whole process probably would have taken about 7 minutes, you know, not an hour. So let's take a look at the whole thing. And, you know, it's really incredible that we're doing all this with liquefy and transform mask, and we're not getting any crashing going on. It's pretty impressive, actually. So I give all the credit to the blue layer. But yeah, I like it. I like what I see. So what he does is he says, Tianara. Okay. So I didn't actually get to show the fix. Let me look at something here real quick. I'm almost sorry that I didn't accidentally distort his face. So let me show you what you would do if you did. Okay. We'll just go to the next frame and I'll show you what you would do. Okay, so let's say I made a little modification Oh, but we got an artifact. You see the artifact? The artifact is that I accidentally made his face skinnier, okay? This is what I dealt with on his shoulder earlier. So I want to show you what the fix is actually pretty darn simple, okay? And in this case, it's pretty bad. So here's what you would do. You'd actually go back one frame. Okay, I've got to get the animation cache to fill. Okay, so I go back one frame to where it's not distorted. Okay, the next frame has the distortion in the cloth that I wanted, but I didn't want the deformation of his face, right? Well, here's what you do. Just go into this layer, just make a selection of the stuff that you want to have not get boogered up. Like that. Control C. Go to the next frame and hit, in my case, it's Control Shift V, which is edit, paste into active layer. Okay. Now I go back here on the color layer, Control C. Sorry, wrong. Got to go to this frame. Control C. Control Shift V. Okay. And didn't quite work as well as I hoped. What is going wrong there? The ink. Did I inadvertently? I think I did. Yep. Yep. I inadvertently pasted. Pasted that in twice. Didn't I? Well, let's try to salvage it. I'm going to go. Let's turn the ink off and let's see if the color. Well, this is a great example of just practical problem solving. So I would say Control Shift V, color, Control C. Ah, darn it. Control C, Control Shift V. That worked. So now it's just the ink. The ink is fouled up. Okay. Ah, yes, I forgot. What you want to do is, see, the selection never changes. Here's the key. I go on the ink layer, I'm going Control C. Now I missed a step. The step is, remember, we're pasting into this selection, right? So therefore, just hit delete. Delete the ink, and then hit Control Shift V. Ta-da! Now that last deformation affected the cloth like we wanted, but I was able to salvage his face. Now, to be fair, it's not perfect, and the jumping around of the shadows is a bit egregious, but I think you guys get the point. Well, yeah, and the fix is quite simple. Same thing I did before. In the shadow layer, make a selection, but in the layer that you're fixing, before you paste it in, delete what's already there. I think that smoothed her out. Okay, now you still have a little bit of winkiness here because of this is a deformation that isn't even supposed to be in the animation, right? But I mean, you can see, this is a good example of what I was talking about with Krita, where it's like, if you kind of know the tools, it's usually pretty, not only easy, but actually usually pretty quick to just fix little things that have gone haywire. Okay, so again, we don't want this keyframe, so I'm just going to go double click that, Control Shift X. This is what we wanted. Okay, so let's turn the transform mask back on. Tianara. Yep. Not bad, not bad, not bad. Okay, Any questions from the class? Any questions, friends? Okay. In order to I won't worry about the lip sync animation at this point. And by the way, this utility layer, we can just delete it. And frankly, I'm not going to delete the sketch. I'm going to say having that around is just kind of a safety remembrance of what I intended to do is probably not the worst thing in the world. And I have a habit of deleting things and then 5 seconds later wishing I had kept them. Okay, one thing we need to fix. Remember, let's turn the transform mask off. Okay, yeah. So in the old days with Credo, when you wanted to add a modification to like a sequence of frames, normally you'd put it on another layer and then bake it down when you're ready to. With the paste into active frame capability, you know, you can, let's say, work flat a little more often. I don't know how else to put it. But anyway, what are you getting at? Well, what I want to do here is I actually want to add a little bit of shadow here. Like that. Okay. So that was a boo-boo. I was supposed to do that on frame 1. Okay. And now, let's say, yeah. Okay, so let's take this, hit the S key, and just select this stuff. Control C. And now I'm going to go to the next keyframe. Control Shift V, just paste it into the active layer. Control Shift V, Control Shift V. Here I can also go Control Shift V, but I'm then going to have to, and this is again a case where there's a good case to be made for just manually painting it, because obviously if the guy's moving around, then his shadow's going to change, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control C now. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard so that I can just reuse it. Control C, Control Shift V. There. So there I just made that fix to the shadows. So the stuff I'm doing right now, to tell you the truth, it's a pretty good example of, like, you know, this is kind of where a lot of your time goes. If you're, you know, if you're Ross Payne, you're going, geez, Dave, just like redraw this stuff. And I gotta agree. And I mean, there's a lot of times where that is the right answer. The thing I would dearly love, if I could have a wish list for Krita, it would be to have a transform tool that effectively lets you grab a selection. Okay, so you've got a selection, and then you have the ability to put a divider in it such that this becomes an axis of rotation, and then it falls off, so that when I rotate his head, for example, these pixels in this region only move a little bit, and the pixels up here obviously would you know, move a lot. That right there would be the killer tool. That would be the cool thing. Just a, you know, a baked in destructive plastic tool is really what that is. Okay, so now we have another problem here with Vespar, in that you know, what about his other arm? So what I've decided to do on this particular shot is to just add a utility layer that's outside of the influence of the transform mask, so I can just paint over it. Okay, so for example, control insert, so put in a keyframe. Sometimes this is the right answer and sometimes it's not, but in this case I'm going to do it this way. So this is just a destructive extra layer to, and this needs to be raw mode, by the way, where I'm not going to deal with shadows or ink or any of that. I'm just gonna just have a flat layer. Okay, so you can see that the transform tool works. So I should say the transform mask. Okay, so here I would say let's just delete that. So again, this is just, we're just trying to be as quick and dirty as we can with this thing. Okay, back here, we'll just pretend his arm is there in the frame, and I'll even bake the shadows in. No problem. Okay, he's got that recoil. That's kind of interesting. But I'm not gonna try to reuse my stuff. I'm just gonna, as I say, just bake it in. When people look at this scene, they're not gonna be looking at his belly button. They're purely gonna be looking at his head, his face, basically, is what people would be looking at. So I'm just gonna do this the old school way. Just draw in a bunch of animation keyframes. Call it good. Here, I suppose I could cheat a little bit. Alright, G key. Let's close up that shadow. And by the way, importantly, what I'm working with right here is never going to be seen anyway. It's going to be cropped out of the frame, actually. So, but here we'll go ahead and finish this out. Give him a little bit of shadow action there. Probably smooth that out. So cool. All right. Oh, I forgot about that. Okay. Okay. Okay, actually, you know what? I'm going to rethink this. The fix up to this point is probably fine, but I had thought of this earlier and I basically forgot. Right about here, there's two things we need to fix. So let's turn the transform mask off, and we'll turn this fix layer off. Number one, he needs a shoulder pad on this side. Number two, I actually think I'm going to delete his arm so that his arm can be animated the way I was just doing on this extra layer. Just on the fly. We'll just draw shapes and block it in. So, number one, let's get this color here. And ink layer. Make sure I got my correct brush. Okay. Let's turn this back on. Okay, so there you go. There's your classic situation. You go, well, wait a minute, he's disappeared. Yep. Well, we can deal with that. This is where the fixes I'm doing right now would be easier if it was all baked together, but that's okay. So you can see that distortion in his face. That's really pretty unacceptable. So let's grab the color layer. I'm going to do exactly what I described earlier. I'm going to grab a selection, copy it to the clipboard, go back to the prior frame, hit delete, and then Control-Shift-V. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the ink. Control-C, go back one frame, hit delete, and then Control-Shift-V. That's how I solved that little artifact. Okay, so now we've got this. Same thing, you know. I have to say, probably if I wasn't demonstrating this, I probably would, I'd probably be baking down the layers, I think. I might not, but I probably would. Control-Shift-V. Well, actually, let's hit delete first, then Control-Shift-V. Delete. Okay, there we're going to have to redraw it in. No big deal. No big deal, friends. Control-C. Delete. Boom. Whoops, don't want to do that. I hit the arrow instead of the next keyframe. Delete. Control-Shift-V. And previous keyframe. Delete. Control-Shift-V. Okay, cool. So we got that in there. And then we got to... Probably wouldn't be the worst idea in the world to actually just try to do a proper selection here. So that I can just sneak it in wherever I need to. And again, it's the fact that the ink and the paint are together is definitely more of a pain than usual. Control-Shift-V. Actually, I'm going to delete that. Oh boy, that's not what I intended to do. Okay, gotcha. Gotcha, friend. Well, like I said, why not just redraw it, friend? Why not just redraw it? Definitely. Ba-doop, boop, ba-doop, boo. Time to do some quick and dirty cleanup. We are in the color layer. Color. Color. Ink. And we're just gonna do it the old school way. Well, this is where having the drawing you know, correct before you go and start distorting things would be probably well advised. Okay, that was stupid. Seriously, dude? I want to check something here. This is bugging me a bit. Well, I guess that is correct. The three-dimensionality of it wasn't quite making sense to my addled brain. Okay, that... Now it's not going to change. Okay, so... Color... Go back here, grab that, go here. Turn the shadows off and just do a fill operation on that. Okay, cool. Now we're going to go S key, grab that stuff, Control C, Control Shift V, Control Shift V, Control Shift V. And let's do the same thing on the ink. Ink layer, Control C. Control Shift V. Okay, cool. So yeah, that definitely needed to be done. Just, well, okay, but hey, okay, Ross, let's, okay, this is 12 minutes ago when you said this, just redraw this stuff. Were you just kind of poking at me because I said, you're just funning with me because I said that that's what you would say, right? That's what's going on here. Okay, so in this case, that's a little distorted. I think it shrunk. Nah, it's okay. It's actually okay. You know, you get some microscopic, you know, and just zooming in there and you lose the sense of scale. Okay, what was the other thing? Oh, yeah. I was going to just kill the arms. So, frankly, friends, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make it fun to animate. So I'm going to cut the arm off as kind of parallel to the body as I can. Let's continue from there after we get the color out. Ross, I get the feeling that you are a bit of a jokester. Is that true? Is that true, my friend? Are you a jokester? Because I think you're a jokester. Frankly, how can you be like doing the animation thing and not be a bit of a jokester? Well, I don't know. I mean, I shudder to admit it, but I'm really a pretty serious guy. Okay, I want to go shift. I want to go S key and then shift. You're just funny. You're a rubber. You're a rubber. I'm gonna assume that's like a New Zealand term for jokester or something. Okay, you're going. You guys are like, what are you doing, man? Okay. I really wanted to just slap the arm animation in here. I just wanted to wing it, frankly. Turn the transform animation back on. And flow with me on this. Okay, let's turn the shadows back on so we're not completely flying blind. Alright. Yes. Yeah, this is going to be somewhat fun-ish. Alright, G key. Okay, let's grab this. Okay. Those typos will get you. That's funny. He said rubber when he meant ribber. He's ribbing me. Gotcha. Now I understand what's going on. I'm gonna just keep flowing with this. I'm going to keep flowing. Oh, shoot. Look at that. That's horrible. Well, easy to fix, though. Okay. I actually think I want to turn this around. Yes. Golly, the crap you cannot see until you flip the canvas is crazy. That is nuts. Am I seeing that correctly? How in the world? I am not seeing that correctly. Sorry, guys. There's a glitch here. Well, maybe I am. I don't know. No, this is where actually Nagut 40 is correct. It would make more sense just to... This is where I should be probably just going back to the pencil test stage and just sketch this out. Because look what I just did. Something Krita did not do its calculations correctly. Let's put it that way. When I flip the canvas. So that's kind of concerning because the software should know how to do the math, but I am pretty sure. See, look at that. That's totally wrong. I didn't draw that. I mean, I might suck, but I don't suck that bad. Okay, so here he's gonna, all right, so I'm gonna grab this color. That's interesting. Well, I'm going to abandon this. I'm going to abandon this whole idea and actually do exactly what I said, which is go back to the... it's not like I haven't seen this happen a million times. You know, what we need to do... I don't want to go back to this sketch layer, but okay, just to redeem myself here, guys. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. All right, so we'll call this pencil test 2, just so that I'm not a complete idiot. All right, let's take Vespar and turn him down. Okay, and I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and block this in and then probably call it quits. Yeah, I've been going for 2 hours. No wonder I'm starting to run out of gas. Okay, sorry, we wanted the brush, not the... Come on. And for crying out loud, when doing a pencil test, the last thing we want is smoothing to be turned on. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just go forward 1 frame at a time and block in the definite keyframes that we're going to want. So there's... This is interesting. This is probably another reason why I should be quitting right now. Because if I really thought this through, there is probably a way to bake this secondary body motion into the animation without the transform mask being turned on. But I digress. For the moment, we'll keep trudging ahead. Okay. I'm just going to play with this. I'm thinking maybe his hand should come up. So he says, So we'll just draw a little boxing glove to represent his hand. Okay, and then we'll let it sit. Boom. 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 We'll leave that. Okay, that's got to come out. I'm thinking about the way Margaret Hamilton used her hands when she played the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, because I remember. Do you remember that from The Wizard of Oz? She's kind of going. I can't remember what she was saying to Dorothy, but I think it was when she had the hourglass, and she's kind of talking with her hands and kind of going like this, like she's thinking. So she was really acting with her hands. I can't even say I think she necessarily did a great job of it, but I remember it. That's for sure. So let's just see what we have here. You guys will be able to see what I'm trying to do. Okay, not bad. This is all too smooth. Yeah. This is way too smooth. Right there it falls apart. I think I'm going to go ahead and kill those keys, because I think this was wrong. This really needs to flow with his body a little bit more. Maybe start to come up a little bit there. I'm kind of with Richard Williams on this. He says in the Animator's Survival Kit, he talks about how people go a little crazy with squash and stretch. And a lot of times you can keep things pretty darn rigid and it's going to work just fine. Okay, so we're going to get this hand out of the frame. So yeah, I'm just basically dealing with the body language here. So he says, Tianara. Yeah, so Tianara, right there. So actually what I want to see, I think, insert, easing, okay, we weren't supposed to have two here, GE, BE, okay, this is kind of interesting. what if, let's just try this. What if we do this? Let's work backwards. And then this should move fairly quickly out of the way. Okay. Sticks and balls, right? I haven't done a lot of talking about sticks and balls in a long time, but okay, that last frame I'm not so sure about. I think I'm going to take that one out. So, just trying to get the movement. Boom. Tianara. Okay, I don't love it. Frankly, yes, that's the one, Maria. That's right. She did. Okay, so the thing I don't like here is this is all too gradual and flowy. So again, this is probably why I should quit, because it's one of those things that I would want to like sit down and really think privately about what the acting needs to be, kind of think like a director. Yeah, that's better. Taking that one keyframe out so it snaps a bit. But I'm not sold on the position here. Oops, darn it. I need to have a selection. I mean, obviously we need to work the the thickness of the arms into these drawings if I'm going to go this direction, but it's definitely not the worst idea I've ever had. I still don't like the timing of it though. So yeah, completely has to be redesigned. This is pretty bad actually. Everything's too mechanically locked to the overall pacing of the body movement, if you will. So when does this land? He scoops up like that. Frankly, one thing that would help would be get rid of this. That shouldn't be coming up like that. This should be one hand kind of coming up like that. Tianara. Dee-dee-dee-dee. There's a Krita-ism for you. This is something, it'll drive you nuts if you use Krita very long, is that Krita ostensibly caches the animation in memory. Okay. There's literally no reason, or in my opinion, excuse why it should ever take more than a second for the animation to cache. But if it truly was doing it in the background, you'd never have to wait. What it actually does is kind of the opposite. When you've just made changes to a frame, you'll sit there, and the one thing that isn't in memory is the very frame that you just changed that you want to see. So then you'll sit here and you'll kind of scroll back and forth over top of it and scrub, and you won't see your the most important frame that you're wanting to see will be the one that is completely not visible till about 3-5 seconds later when it finally decides to fill up. Or if you hit play, it'll I find it baffling, but there it is. Okay, so I think I'll come back to this. 2 hours is enough, considering I already worked on animation for 6 hours today previously to this. So if there are no more questions to end the day, then I think I will sign off and say, hey guys, you know that there will be more